Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us today for our webinar, The Future of L&D, A Blended Approach. My name's Andy Norton. I'm one of the trainers here with Grahame, Robb Associates, and we're joined today with Grahame, Robb, and Joe Mackintosh. Just before we'd like to begin, I just want to give you a quick overview of some of the functions. On the toolbar, there will be a chat function there. Please feel free to type into it and just let us know, say hello, introduce yourselves to the other attendees in whichever language you feel most comfortable with. We've got another couple of different other functionalities we're going to use during the course of today's webinar. In the handout section, there is our e-learning brochure that you're more than welcome to download if you haven't already had a look. And during the course of the webinar, we're also going to be using some polls for you to engage actively in the webinar. Other than that, I'd like to hand over to Grahame and we'll begin.
Okay, thank you, Andy, and hello to all our existing customers and any new people joining us for the first time. In terms of today's webinar, I'd just like to take you through the journey we're going to go on. So first, we're going to start with a little bit about GRA, look at the challenges facing us as a business and some of the challenges that you might be facing too. Looking at the changes that we're facing and what does that mean for L&D and organizational development. Spend a bit of time thinking about what we've learned from the pandemic and how that might help you, and look at our approach to blended learning going forward and some top tips for the future of L&D. Just move this slide on. So a little bit about GRA. We've been in business for 30 years, primarily in team and leadership development. We have two outdoor centres, one at St George's Park, which is the home of the England football team, and the other one, which is Wakefield Estate near Reading, in the grounds of Wakefield, the De Vere Hotel. We also have a head office in Winchester. We have a team of 55 staff and associate trainers. The majority of those are freelancers. Over the last 5 years, we worked in 28 different countries, from the Australian bush through to probably most countries in Europe. Some of those programs have been outdoors, a couple of them in China, which have been outdoors as well. Over the past 30 years, we kind of started in a bedroom and we progressed to these two outdoor sites and obviously a head office, but we've had to reinvent ourselves on 3 or 4 occasions just to keep pace with the market and adapt our business accordingly. Everything was going fantastically well until March this year. So just moving to the next slide. This is what it looked like for us. I thought this was a tsunami actually, but my colleagues pointed out it was a cloud. I don't know if you can see there's a flotilla of sailing boats on the horizon, but they're very, very tiny. Probably we perceived ourselves as being like a little yacht in the bottom left-hand corner. And yeah, that's how it seemed for us. Our revenue dropped by 95%, so that was pretty scary. We do a lot of work for the Clipper Round the World yacht race, and we spent time developing all their leaders and first mates last year before the beginning of the race. And they talk about 100-foot waves and mast slaps, where the mast actually slaps on the surface of the water, so it turns through 90 degrees. Which is pretty scary stuff. It did seem like that for us. So we had to think, how are we going to survive? How are we going to stay in business? And we spent a lot of time, we reckon around 7,000 hours, figuring out our strategy and how we were going to adapt to the future. Next slide. So we started by thinking about our principles and what has made us successful over this 30 years and kept us in business, which is which is an achievement. And these are not values, these are how we feel we adapt to our learners and to our clients. So the first principle we have is that we need to make a difference. So we have to make a difference to individuals, teams, and organizations. We have to get a better result. So we are results focused. We have to be flexible in terms of how we adapt to the needs of the client and also the learners. And we have to be experiential. So we do bits of theory and then we try to bring it to life by giving people real experience, whether those are outdoor scenarios, whether they're at the top of a telegraph pole in an outdoor centre, or whether it's holding a difficult conversation in an indoor setting. Our goal is to touch people's emotions, because that way it makes our learning memorable. Probably in the last year alone, we've had 10 people from across the globe say to us that our programs made a significant difference to their life or to their organization. Many of those people are CEOs, and we might have seen those 20, 25 years ago. The final principle that we feel is really important is making it fun. And we always try to make all our programs fun. What dawned on us was that these principles have perhaps inhibited us from fully engaging with online and virtual and self-paced learning. We dabbled with self-paced learning. We created a strategic leadership program called Beyond Default, which we worked up with the authors, and that's a very good program. But we hadn't fully engaged with online, virtual, self-paced. And COVID-19 has forced us to consider that. So necessity being the mother of invention. Just moving on to the next slide is, this is what it looked like, a series of train tracks. And our worry was that we might end up in a siding and go out of business. What we really wanted to do is figure out how can we cope with these challenges and survive and grow in the future. So just thinking about some of the other businesses that we're hearing about daily on the news, Virgin Atlantic, this has rocked them so badly so that they're looking for a bailout. They're on the verge of a financial collapse. Another interesting company is TM Louis, the shirt company. And you think, people are always going to want shirts. But the fact is, people are rocking up to work now in hoodies. They're not buying shirts anymore, so they're on the verge of collapse. We hear on the news this morning the Daily Mirror is suffering badly because people are not buying newspapers. In railway stations, they're not going out of their homes, and many people are moving to online newspapers. Universities and business schools, where are they getting their next delegates from? In the UK, we rely on people from overseas. Are they going to be fearful of travelling? Are they going to be allowed to travel? Those are all issues that every one of these businesses are having to face up to. Just home working, a survey done by Towers and Watson said that companies in Western Europe and the UK, now 62% of their people are working from home. Pre-COVID, there was less than 10% working from home. So people are learning to work in different ways. They are obviously learning to work from home. How do we integrate them if they ever come back to the office? How are we going to engage with them? So we decided 5 things as a small business. We decided we're going to embrace fully blended, which Andy will talk to you a little more about further on in this webinar. We're going to go totally paperless. We're going to endeavour to work remotely. We're going to sell our head office, and we're going to retain our principals. So if we go down the blended route, we're still going to adhere to those principles. I was thinking back to when I was a trainee, and one of the first presentations I put together was included this slide. And probably this has been presented by every CEO forever. People are our greatest asset. And I think now is the time for L&D and HR to shape up and really kind of bring this to life. Because how are we going to value companies in future? Are we going to be looking at buildings as assets? Probably not. If we as a small business can decide we're going to get rid of our head office, we're going to work from home, we're going to work virtually, the same is going to apply to many other businesses. Obviously, some businesses can't do that, but a lot of people are going to be working obviously in a completely different way. So our view is that the purpose of L&D is to create the right conditions for people to do their best work. And that means finding ways of people being able to exercise their full potential, release their full potential. The trouble is that the conditions that we're working in have totally changed. So this affords a fantastic opportunity for HR, L&D to rethink how they approach learning going forward. Now, again, we've spent a lot of time thinking about what we've learned from the pandemic on an individual level, on a team level, how we've engaged with each other. So I'm going to hand over to Joe, who's going to talk you through some personal experiences he's had, which may benefit you and may help you to think about how you can apply this learning back in your companies. Joe, over
Thanks,
to you.
Grahame. Yeah, thanks. So really, I'm going to start this off by just thinking about some general statements that have probably been you've heard over the last, well, specifically 100 days, 3 months, 4 months, but we've been hearing for a long time as well. I think one of the interesting things is that the pandemic has fast-tracked a lot of these things. So we can work from home. Is a statement. People can be trusted. People can be productive at home. We've kind of known that, but it's now been really demonstrated. And at some stage, hopefully not in the too distant future, we're going to drop the from home bit. People are just working. Work has taken on a different meaning to some degree, and can be done in different ways. So I guess there's a big assumption behind that, which is assuming people have got the right resources. I think that one of the other things is, and it seems obvious to say, but it's so important, is that choice is important. You think about all the experience that we've had over the last 100 days, 110 days. One of the probably biggest complaints has been just a lack of choice and the impact of that. We can spend time at home and probably enjoy it, but when we've been asked to do it and that's all we can do, it then becomes a burden. Even the working from home bit. If that's something that has been enforced, then yes, for some people that's going to be incredibly fulfilling and satisfy lots of things. However, when it's been imposed, it's going to be constraining. And that travels through lots of different aspects of of life as well. From engaging in online shopping, for instance, to going out to do some shopping just in the shops. When we're being told to do one thing and it's constrained, then it has an impact. So I think that choice thing is important, and how we translate that choice through to L&D and OD and our initiatives is going to be incredibly important. Technology, as we've kind of also discussed, is going to be important, and it's important. Technology doesn't mean it needs to be a substitute for interaction and connectivity. In the past, probably some of the beliefs that we've maybe had have been things like, well, I need to have this interaction face to face. This meeting needs to be face to face. From our experience, as Grahame alluded to, or said, we've got a number of different sites, and in fact, we might not have seen those people at those sites for 2-3 weeks at a time. But in the early days of lockdown, essentially when we were living on Teams, those individuals said themselves they'd never felt more connected to the organisation and never felt more connected to as a team, from before, in contrast to before. And I think one of the other things, and this seems an obvious thing for us to say, because for many of you, you know that we run Crucial Conversations and Crucial Accountability, and that is all about speaking up. But never before has there been such a need for a speak up culture. And if you think about just simple example, we were talking the other day around going to the shops, and again the different experiences in lockdown that people have had when it comes to shopping. In the early stages of lockdown, speak for our household, it was just one of us that was going to the shops every Saturday. We'd have an online shop, and then every Saturday one of us would go to the shop because we got a 10-year-old and we didn't want to take her to the shop. And whether I'm ashamed to say or not, it wasn't me that was the one that was going to the shop. It was my other half was going to the shop. So when it came to probably a good 8 weeks before I ventured going out to the shop, and part of the anxiety there was, and there was anxiety, part of the thought process was thinking, well, I know everybody else knows what they're doing now. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm probably going to stand in the wrong place or do the wrong thing, or get in somebody's way, or worse, get told off. That's just going to the shops. Think about what that's going to be like for people that have been furloughed and are coming back into business and possibly coming back into the organisation. If they've been working from home, they might have still been working, absolutely, but they've not been working in the environment that they've been used to, and that environment, physical environment, may well have changed. If they've been furloughed, they've not been working, so some of the skills and some of the knowledge that they had might not be, the required knowledge and skills, that's going to get that business out of, COVID. So think of the anxiety that's going to be there. And I mean, most of us probably are thinking about this, but it's just thinking, well, what's our response to it? And that's where, that speak up culture is so important. And therefore our response to that is important as well. One of the things that one of the authors of Crucial Conversations said fairly recently was, about speaking up is one thing, but our response to people speaking up is just as, if not more important. So how businesses, how we create that culture of it's okay to speak up is going to be absolutely crucial. And part of that is going to be helping people with their assumed constraints and their limiting beliefs and the stories that they're telling themselves about what they can do or can't do. And I'm just going to use a very crass example, around, this is our journey. And as Grahame said before, these principles certainly, on analysing why hadn't we engaged in the past with, more on virtual classroom, more on e-learning, was because we told ourselves, well, we can't do our principles justice. So there's a lot of assumed constraint there. We've been playing this over 7,000 hours, trying to kind of navigate our way through this. I'll share a story which kind of just in some ways, summed up the experience. Considering that we're, most people on this webinar probably have some sort of L&D capacity or are involved in it in some sort of way, or HR. If you think about probably our profession has been limited to the use of virtual or e-learning for the past, and slowly but surely probably there's been elements of face-to-face, but that face-to-face has probably still been virtual. So here's a question for you, and I'd like you to be super honest. Don't worry, it's totally anonymous. Nobody is going to know who's answered what here. But we're going to just put up a little poll here. And what I'd like you to answer honestly is, how much self-paced learning have you undertaken in the last 100 days? So please select one of those. So none, a little, some, or a lot. They're not just general terms, the most goal-orientated or specific of metrics here, but just your general feel. So the poll's open. Please vote. We'll give you a couple more seconds just to find the bit that you click on and give your answer. So how much self-paced learning, considering this is something that we should have a vested interest in, how much are we engaging in it ourselves? So I don't know, Andy is in control of the poll here, so I think that's probably enough time. Andy, would you say to have the poll open? Shall we close it? And then in a second we'll see hopefully some results. Okay, wow, so we've got 10% saying none, 30, so 32% saying a little. So, that's a good start there. 42% either none or a little. And then, some 37%. And I wonder, what proportion, 22% not. And I mean, the chances are you may have come across this conclusion way before we came across this conclusion. But it would be interesting to see if these numbers, we're going to ask you to do this poll again in a second. This was something that we were going through ourselves. We were talking about, our engagement with self-paced e-learning, self-paced learning, virtual classroom, all those things to think, right, how are we going to survive as a business? How do we get our principals involved in this? And one of the comments from somebody in our business was, well, I struggle with e-learning. I struggle with self-paced learning. I don't really get on with it. My experience hasn't been great up to this point. But then we kind of thought about it and reframed it a little bit and said, well, actually, is that really true? Because at this point, we were trying to build our capacity on virtual classrooms. And the person that said this and was doing most of the heavy lifting on the creation of the virtual classroom platform, anytime we came across a problem in the virtual classroom, the first thing they'd do is go and fix it. And the way they'd fix it is learn about it. The way they'd learn about it was go onto YouTube. And then we thought, well, actually, that's kind of self-paced. It's A, it's self-paced because it's self-directed learning, and B, it's e-learning because it's online. It's YouTube. So I've thought about this myself as well, and thought about almost the genesis and the journey of and what this affords us to be doing and reframing the world of L&D and our attitudes to L&D and our attitudes to the modalities and of L&D, what that actually means. So I was thinking about my experience, so this is maybe a crass example and maybe a self-indulgent example. I'm not looking for any sort of congratulations here or praise or feedback. So, but I've never considered myself much of a gardener. Maybe it's from being a 12, 13-year-old up in Scotland, and all our weekends for a period of time, because we moved into a new house, was spent in the garden trying to landscape it. So whether that was enough to put me off gardening for life, but I've never considered myself a gardener in any way, and that's not just gardening. That's probably anything DIY, because I'd have had a self-belief that I wasn't very good at it, didn't know what I was doing, and probably didn't have the motivation to do it. But when lockdown came down, what was curious was that because we'd had quite a lot of work done, and actually the garden was a complete stay. So this was our back garden. Last year, after some of the work, we had remnants of the old conservatory taken down. With tiles out in the back, wheelbarrows strewn there. It was just a forgotten land. It was a lost world there. We had Murray Mount as well, or Henman Hill, whichever one you subscribe to, on the left-hand side. So that was the state of it. And whether it was because of the pressure of lockdown, and in the early stages of lockdown, we were told, right, only go out for one bit of exercise a day, and limit your amount of time outdoors only for essential shopping, that sort of stuff. We started thinking as a family, well, how are we going to stay sane to a degree, or what we're going to do? We're very lucky that we had the garden. I absolutely acknowledge that and appreciate that, and that's just not an experience everyone had. I'm just talking from my experience. But we decided, right, well, let's have that as a weekend thing. That is going to be our weekend activity for the foreseeable, because we had no idea how long things were going to be. So we wouldn't do it in the weekdays, because we were working, both myself and my wife were working full time. And during the weekdays, we would kind of work, and then at the weekends we'd do bits of the garden. So suddenly there was this motivation, external pressure maybe, that was the thing that kind of inspired that. But that wasn't enough in order to then do the garden. Of course, I had to learn how to do it. And much as the same with my colleague, and maybe inspired by that, I thought, well, where do I am a fairly with it together person. I can learn stuff. I've learned stuff in the past, so maybe I can learn this. And so went onto YouTube and consumed loads of, probably honestly spent so much time on YouTube in terms of looking at videos that would mean it was the least amount of work. If something looked like it was really complicated, then I was like, oh no, I can't do that. Let's see, and scroll forward and see if there was something else that looked a little bit easier. But slowly but surely built up the knowledge and the capacity to do it. And this is the garden now. So this took 6 weeks I mean, really, it only took 6 weekends to go from what it was before to that. That is me down in the bottom left corner laying the lawn, which was, you know, an interesting process. But yeah, it's not perfect, and it's, you know, it's I'm not going to suddenly start up a landscaping company, but that was some of the belief as well that I had to shatter, because, you know, what this taught me and what I was curious about was, you know, how this helped really reframe what self-paced learning was and what the potential for e-learning is, and you know, what makes a meaningful learning experience, and also the impact that that can have on self-esteem and self-belief, you know. And, you know, and really as L&D professionals, that is what we are about. You know, we are about helping people shatter their self-limiting beliefs in order to realize what they're truly capable of. And, you know, that's the thing that we've got to keep, I think, you know, front and center focused on. That is our role. And I do think that there's going to be a real need for that to be addressed and that to be the focus, because of the self-limiting beliefs that people are going to be having when they come, you know, back into the physical workplace or coming back from furlough as well. So just a question to you, maybe pop this in the chat box. You know, from your perspective, what do you think made that, you know, framing it in terms of, you know, a self-paced e-learning experience, you know, what made that, you know, the garden scenario, a meaningful self-paced e-learning experience? So just have a thought about that and just throw that into the chat box, and we'll see what comments are coming up. But really, you know, what it got us thinking about was, you know, what the process is, you know, my individual process, and how this can then translate into L&D, OD, going forward in many ways. Simplistic, yes, but there's no problem with that, really. But, you know, that was about finding the motivation to learn, you know. So that was maybe self-generated to a degree from the situation, but, you know, us as L&D, you know, us as an L&D provider and organisation to support internal L&D functions, you know, our role, and I would say that internal L&D functions role, is to really tap into and inspire people to be motivated to learn. Now, part of that has got to be, are they learning the right stuff in order for it to be effective? But, you know, our job is, as much as anything, is to, you know, make the case for that learning. You know, and then there's the individual aspect in terms of, you know, how we acquire the knowledge, you know. And, you know, one of the things that we nearly put up on one of the slides earlier on was, you know, people learn in different ways. Such an obvious statement, but, you know, how much choice have we in the past, you know, provided learners, really, the method and the modality of learning? You know, even, you know, when we were having this discussion internally around, you know, the self-paced thing, you know, there was disparities between, well, I quite like to be shown on video and even talked through by somebody what should be doing stage by stage, contrasted with other people who said, well, I'm actually quite happy with just having them all out in an instruction sheet, you know, and I'll read it myself and then I'll put it into practice. And it's all sort of basic stuff, but actually when we think about it and apply it to, you know, what we're doing, I mean, I think it could be quite impactful, you know. And finally, I think the aspect of the practical application, to me personally, I think what made that a meaningful e-learning, self-paced e-learning experience, you know, was the result that it attained. And how often, I wonder, do we put people on courses, or people are on courses and asked to go through learning initiatives when there's no real opportunity for them to put into practice what they've learned? So it's kind of irrelevant. Which is maybe, you know, doing us a disservice, maybe shooting ourselves in the foot. But this, I think, is something that, you know, now more than ever is an opportunity for us to think about. I'm just wondering about some of the comments that we might have had in terms of what made that, you know, a learning experience. Andy, did you see any there? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, there's some good questions about how you did it in your own time and the reward of sitting in a lovely, nice garden at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, how did it? I mean, the how did it in own time was, it was just literally it was at weekends, you know. So, you know, there would be times when I'd be thinking, you know, working Monday to Friday, thinking, oh, I want to get out in the garden, I really want to get out in the garden, but it was just a discipline, and me and my wife kind of going, no, that's a weekend thing. And so honestly, we only did it at weekends. And so for those first 6-7 weeks, I have to say that since lockdown has relaxed, I've probably been in the garden a lot less because I've been able to go out and do a lot more. But that was the, for the first time probably in my life, certainly as as an adult, being so disciplined around my time and going, that is a weekend activity. And it is amazing what and it wasn't just me that did it. Obviously, my wife massively helped. And yeah, the reward is being able to it certainly made the lockdown stuff a lot easier. And again, I appreciate that is a very unique or can be a unique and a privileged position to be in. Not everybody has that. But I hope it's the essence. So just going to open the poll again and just think about this now. So with that reframing it in that sort of way, it'd be interesting to see whether the numbers change at all, because we asked the client this. When we were building this webinar and said, how much e-learning have you done? And they said, none, really. And I said, well, then told them the story and they went, oh, actually, when you frame it like that, I fixed my, it was either the washing machine or the tumble dryer. And, couldn't get anybody out to fix it. It packed up. So I went on to YouTube and learned how to fix a motor and fixed it myself. So, whether it be learning a new, menu option, whether it be learning how to refine a golf swing or some, really, you could say that any yoga or any classes like that, it's, if you've been going onto YouTube, that's all e-learning. So let's open that poll again. This is risky because, like I say, you might have all got there a lot quicker than us and have been doing this and made this realization a lot sooner. But let's see if there's we'll open the poll again and let's see if there's any differences. And again, probably that's time to close it. Wow. So we had 10% before had said that they had done none. Now, no one is saying that they did none or they'd done none. So, we've now got, as opposed to, what was it? It was something like 37% before had either done none or very little. Now only 10% have done none or very little. And most, it's 90% have done some or a lot. And I think that kind of, illustrates the point really, is that part of our challenge is to reframe, what self-paced e-learning is, give it a better name, and partly also, really be making the case for, what L&D and learning is required. And this isn't just soft skills. This isn't just us trying to tout the business. This is the hard skill stuff as well, because like I mentioned before, I think there is going to be a real need to upskill people into. We've probably all heard the new normal term. At some stage, new normal is just going to become normal. I guess this is a framework. So I guess thinking about those three aspects, very simplistic view on Cole's learning cycle, you could kind of say, but really tapping into how do we create the motivation to learn? How do we make the case? What are the choices that we give individuals to how best attain the relevant information, knowledge that is going to help them, and of course the benefit of which, once they practically apply it and see the benefit of it, how that is going to help with their self-esteem, with their confidence, and ultimately, with their contributions to the business. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Andy, who's going to share how some of this stuff has really shaped what we're thinking about how the business goes forward, and what our services can be and how we can help support people from our perspective.
Thanks, Joe. So I'd just like to start by drawing attention to the picture in front of you, and this might be a picture that you're already very familiar with. The idea that the future of L&D is one that is truly blended, that in best regards is a combined effort, a mixture of different deliveries of approaches and modalities. And I think Joe's talked quite extensively about self-paced e-learning, and my own personal experience of it has been, PowerPoint presentation gets loaded up and you just click through it, and found that very disengaging. But actually, when you're thinking about it, there are multiple different ways content can be delivered, whether that's podcasts, audiobooks, YouTube videos, discussion groups, whatever it might be, which will allow users to engage in that content. I think a lot of L&D trainers and practitioners, whether privately owned training companies or within organizations, have a preference for face-to-face training. But in the current climate, that hasn't been possible. And I think live virtual classroom sometimes is seen as the link between self-paced e-learning and that face-to-face training. And a personal story from me is at the moment I'm doing a master's, and I've been writing my dissertation all about the effectiveness of live virtual classroom. And I actually started this research project in February before lockdown, and the individuals who were engaged in that research process with me loved live virtual classroom. They could connect with their trainers, they could speak to each other, they could access learning from their home anywhere in the world. They just needed an internet connection. They thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, which in many experiences it is. But this research process is still ongoing. We're now into July, and the same individuals are now finding that, they have a real need for physical face-to-face training. There's loads of articles out there in the news and in the press about people being zoomed out, about people needing to have the subtleties that communicate across between individuals that only exists in face-to-face training, whether that's indoor or outdoor. And again, from personal experience, if I have to do one more quiz on Zoom, I'm going to probably go away and cry in a corner. I think I'm all zoomed out. There is this real need for the sociomotive learning from face-to-face. So technology, I think, like never before now, we're starting to embrace it in new ways. And often technology should be a companion to learning, not necessarily the driver. But I think sometimes you can't see the wood from the trees, and you have to squash your own preconceptions, your own assumed constraints effectively about what technology can do for learning, because I think technology and L&D is going to be far more wedded in the future. And I just wanted to share a couple of examples that you may or may not be familiar with from that I'm experienced at the moment. The first one is geofencing. So you draw a fence essentially around a particular site or part of a site. And then when your users, whether that's employees or contractors, enter that fenced off location, they get an alert on their phone with predetermined content. So that might be changes to on-site procedures, risk assessments, specific training due to the equipment that's in that location. But it allows L&D to connect with learners in a different way. The next one is virtual reality. So virtual reality has been ticking over in the background for quite a while now. Now you can get virtual reality headsets and TVs for home. But thinking about how it affects L&D, I've got quite a few friends in the NHS who they're paramedics, they train other paramedics, and they're looking at the way that they can take a picture of the inside of the ambulance, convert it into virtual reality, so that student paramedics can then, without being in the ambulance, whether that's at home or in the classroom, learn where all the equipment is inside the ambulance. So they've got that deliberate practice so that they can, in a real life situation, be better equipped to deal with and retrieve whatever they need to. Micro-learning, I think we're seeing an ever-changing demographic coming into the workplace, and there's a really good article in the Harvard Business Review about this, about the way that people want to take information. So there is definitely a shift towards having 1 to 5 minutes of content, whether that's a video, a podcast, or just it's in-app, and they get the content, they reflect on it briefly, and they want to practically apply that straight away. And finally, AI, again, a little bit like VR, artificial intelligence is coming. Its uses are quite mixed at the moment, but Microsoft Office are starting to use it in PowerPoint to give people feedback on their presentations. And what we're starting to see with regards to self-paced e-learning is that as individuals are going through the content, they can chat to the bot. So they chat just in a chat box, and they can ask questions, and then the AI program will test their understanding of the content. So it's quite exciting. You can probably hear the passion in my voice. So what I want to do is take this opportunity to launch, just to bring your attention to GRA's launching our learning experience portal. So Grahame alluded at the start of the program that we're moving away from paper. We're trying to be a paperless organization. So any program, regardless of the delivery method, whether it's online or face-to-face, will utilize this learning experience portal. It's not a replacement for existing LMSs, but it does have a range of functions, and there will be a future webinar on this, so I'm just going to very briefly skate over the top. But like I say, even if you're on a face-to-face training, it'll have things like your joining instructions in there, any pre or post work. It'll have a resource library that will either allow learners to be directed to it or undertake undirected or indirected learning pre or post the course. Discussion groups with other learners. You'll be able to contact your trainer. We'll also have all our e-learning modules and virtual classroom software in there, and we're going to have interactive workbooks. The final thing that is really good about it, or that I get excited about it, is there's going to be quite a lot of in-depth analytics there, and there will be the opportunity to have third-party plugins there, so we could connect with your organization's existing LMS if you want to do that. So just feel free to talk to us about that. We've been talking about the blended approach, and from GRA's perspective, essentially there's four main modalities and approaches that we're looking at: the indoor face-to-face, or the traditional classroom physical training, the outdoor practical application, live virtual classroom, and self-paced e-learning. And as we've talked about and discussed, there are pros and cons to each of these modalities, and certainly I just want to make clear that GRA isn't becoming a digital-only company. We feel that we're able to offer, regardless of the content, in these methods. So for instance, we've been doing quite a lot of coaching recently. We've been doing a lot of resilience for results and leadership training. We feel we can offer that content in all four, or a combination of these four modalities and approaches. Obviously, at the moment, the way that we can operate safely is fairly limited. So sometimes we like to think of this as a jar. So within the jar at the minute, because of the constraints of COVID-19 and the guidance that we have from the UK government, essentially we're operating on live virtual classroom and self-paced e-learning. Phase 2 will be the introduction of face-to-face. Okay, we feel that there is a crying out from essentially the working populace that need that physical connectivity. They need to be able to go and meet and talk to people. And I mean, that's certainly true of me and many of my friends. Sometimes, as good as technology is in terms of webcams and conference calls, sometimes you lose that subtlety of communication that you need for certain elements of training. So we feel the next phase will be indoor face-to-face, and then finally outdoor practical application utilizing our two outdoor leadership centers. So going forward, for us, what we feel a truly blended future will be completely bespoke to you. So regardless of the content, we'll choose the delivery methods in consultation with you that we think best suit your organizational needs and your learner needs. And you can see there's a couple of 3 examples that have got different levels of different colors, and these represent the amount of time that we use different delivery methods. When we're defining what your needs are, we think there's a couple of key bullet points there. So of course, your budget is going to be really important. Your technology, and that could be the existing technology your organization uses. And also, what we don't want to do is embrace technology in a way that will create a barrier to people's learning. So it's really about having that conversation. Your geography, if you're a global organization, then maybe you lean more towards the virtual and online for part of the modules. And that also links with the business needs, the culture, and your business values. So for instance, if you've just committed to being carbon neutral, for instance, then potentially we'll need to do some more online learning so that you can meet your business values. The time, which is the specific time we have for training, but also the time scale in which you need to initiate and for you want the learners to practically apply the learning back in the business, and any specific learner or individual needs. So just before I hand over to Grahame, we're just going to quickly revisit these principles. I'm not going to go through them one by one because Graham's already done that, but just to reaffirm to you that, whilst it has been a challenge and it's caused us to really think about how do we redefine, how do we rebuild training content for different delivery methods and approaches, because it is challenging how do you make self-paced e-learning experiential? Well, we feel that we've done it, and our commitment to you, and we're very confident about this, is that all of our training, regardless of the delivery method, will meet these principles, because that's what the learners need, and that's what you as organizations need in order to get the best out of your people. If you do have any questions, just pop them in the questions or chat box, and I will try my best to answer them as Grahame wraps up. So, Grahame.
Okay, thanks, Andy and Joe. I think we've got a couple of minutes left, but we're trying to think about 2 or 3 things that could help L&D people, because this is a difficult time, and we've got to think our way out of the problems that we face in businesses or organizations. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about our strategy, where we're going, what we're doing. I don't think enough time is spent by senior leaders thinking about their strategy. And somehow, if we can, as L&D people, and I know this is a bit of a challenge, is to encourage the senior leaders to really think about what is their strategy going forward. If we always do what we've always done, we've always get what we always had. And this is the opportunity to think differently and, you know, break out of what we've been doing. The second thing I've experienced, being the more senior in terms of age in this business, I have learned a fantastic amount from my younger colleagues, Andy, Joe, and some of my other team. I'm not the best at technology. They have massively improved my skills, albeit I've still got a long way to go. And I think there's a real benefit in inverse coaching. So if every senior leader was paired up with a much younger person, a grad or an apprentice, just to help them think about how do they think, how do they see things, and how will technology be influencing the business going forward, and young people's opinions, how they'll be influencing the business going forward. The third area is to challenge assumed constraints. We're in the business of releasing potential of individuals, teams, and organizations. And that means we have to challenge assumed constraints. We have our own limiting beliefs, teams have limiting beliefs, and organizations do as well. So I think we've got to create a culture where people can speak up, where they can share their different points of view, and hopefully we utilize the potential of everybody in the business. So I think that's our kind of top 3 tips to help. Some of them may be challenging. If you've got any other questions, please fire them at us. And if you'd like to get in touch with us over the next couple of days, inquiries@gra.uk.com. There's a phone number, and because most of our people are furloughed or working from home, that phone number comes directly through to me. And our website is at www.gra.uk.com. So please feel free to contact us. We'd love to hear from you. We hope you've gained something from the webinar, and we will be in touch with other webinars which we plan to run every 6 weeks. So thank you for joining us, and stay safe and look after yourselves going forward.